All right. Today we're going to dig into a story that, it feels like it's straight out of a classic Western movie, but this is all too real. We're talking about a cold case that's over 100 years old from the Little Rocky Mountains of Montana. It's about this guy from a really well-off New York family who just vanishes into the wilderness.
So, to really get a grip on this mystery, let's do something a little different. We're actually going to start at the end, or, well, at least how the truth finally started to come out. It's a discovery that sparked this huge murder investigation a full 4 years after the man disappeared.
And here it is, this really blunt, stark newspaper report from August 1910. It basically confirmed everyone's worst fears. You know the missing rancher, Abram Gill? Turns out he didn't just disappear. Nope, he was brutally murdered and his body was hidden away.
So that's the big question, right? Who was this guy, Abram Gill? And how in the world did he end up buried under a cabin floor in the middle of the Montana wilderness? To figure that out, we've got to go back. We need to meet the man at the center of all this. And let me tell you, his life started in a place that is about as far from the Wild West as you can possibly get.
Okay, this is where the story gets really, really interesting. To understand how Abram Gill met his end, you first have to realize this guy was completely out of his element. Where he came from makes what happened to him in the Wild West just so much more shocking.
And here you can just see it, laid out plain and simple. The two worlds of Abram Gill. On one hand, you have a man born into this prominent Brooklyn family. You know, the picture of East Coast civilization. On the other, he ends up buried in the raw, lawless wilderness of Montana. That whole journey, from comfort to total chaos, that's really the heart of this whole mystery. So who was he really? Well, the sources give us a pretty clear picture. Abram, or Abe Gill, was this well-educated young guy, a military veteran who served in the Spanish-American War. And like a lot of people back then, he just felt that pull, the pull of the West. So he heads out to Montana to start a cattle ranch with his partner, Jim Winters, who, get this, was a man his own family had taken in and raised back in New York.
And yeah, this was a serious operation. Their partnership was very real. This here is the official letterhead for the Gill and Winter Ranch. It's a symbol of their legitimate, ambitious new business. But just look at the location, Landusky, Montana. They were trying to build their dream in a place that was, well, just as dangerous as it was beautiful.
Yeah, because the Little Rockies weren't just remote. They were the actual stomping grounds for one of the most notorious outlaw gangs of that whole era, the Curry Gang. Just look at this. This is a real-deal Union Pacific reward poster for the capture of the Curry brothers. They were wanted for a train robbery. This is exactly who Gill and Winters were sharing the landscape with. And let's be clear, these guys weren't some kind of romantic folk heroes. They were violent, dangerous criminals.
And the wanted poster gives us these, incredibly vivid descriptions. These guys weren't just legends or campfire stories. They were real men with small, shifty eyes and heavy, drooping mouths. This was the very real, very human threat living basically right next door to Abe Gill's ranch.
And it wasn't just some vague background threat. After a bunch of really bitter disputes over land and water rights, the danger got personal, fast. In July 1901, the outlaw Harvey Kid Curry shot and killed Jim Winters, Abe's partner. And just like that, Abram Gill was all alone, trying to run a ranch with a giant target on his back. So in the aftermath of his partner's murder, you can imagine how he felt. A terrified Abram Gill sits down and writes a letter to his brother James all the way back in New York. And this letter has become a central piece of this entire cold case.
And here's the actual letter. It's dated just a month after Winters was murdered. And in it, Abe is practically pleading with his brother not to come out to Montana. He's hinting at a danger that's so serious, so profound, he can't even bring himself to describe it fully.
You can just feel the fear coming right off the page, can't you? He's trapped, he knows his life is in danger, but he feels like he can't even risk putting the details in writing, for fear of who might get their hands on the letter. He's basically just asking for blind trust, saying, you know me, trust me on this.
And then he says this. It's so haunting. He's holding on to this desperate hope that the law will eventually catch up to his partner's killers. He even quotes that old proverb, murder will out. It's just, he had no idea how tragically that same phrase would end up applying to his own fate.
And this signature, your true brother Abram, it was one of the very last things his family would ever hear from him. He managed to hold on for another 5 years, just living in the shadow of that constant threat.
Okay, so now we come to the final act. For 5 long years, Abram Gill lived with what he wrote in that letter hanging over his head. Let's see how his story reaches its tragic and still very mysterious conclusion.
The date is October 4th, 1906. This is the day everything just goes silent. Abram Gill finally sells his ranch, he collects the payment, gets on his horse, and he just rides off into the wilderness. And that was it. He was never seen alive again.
When you look at the sequence of events laid out like this, you can almost feel the walls closing in on Abram Gill. It starts with this backdrop of lawlessness, the Curry Gang. Then it gets personal, with the targeted murder of his partner. After years of living in fear, he finally vanishes, which, of course, leads to that grim discovery 4 years down the road.
But here's the thing. Finding his body didn't solve the case at all. It just added more bizarre, confusing layers. I mean, they even found his horse's skeleton hidden away in a cabin. And then, years later, this absolutely incredible lead pops up. A supposed eyewitness confesses the whole thing, the details of the murder, to an American diplomat all the way over in Norway. How wild is that?
And what's truly remarkable about all this is that it isn't just some forgotten piece of history. Nope. Over a century later, the murder of Abram Gill is still, officially, unsolved.
And this just shows you the story is still alive. The Phillips County Museum recently confirmed that Abe's own great-nephew came asking for answers, and they told him that the murder is, and I quote, still open in the law books. It's an active piece of family history, and it's an active cold case. And that's the question that still hangs over the Little Rocky Mountains, isn't it? Will we ever know for certain who killed Abram Gill? The prime suspects are long dead, for sure, but the case is still open. It's just a powerful reminder that the Wild West, it wasn't just a backdrop for movies. It was a real place where justice could be swift, or it could just vanish completely, leaving behind nothing but bones and secrets that the frontier still hasn't given up.